Let's go to Matthew chapter 5. Really crave that you would have your Bibles available and follow with me. We're going to go back and we're probably going to say everything we're going to say this morning. Hope you won't be disappointed. We've already said probably at least 50 times. But trying to allow the Spirit of God to eliminate confusion and bring us into the awareness of not just truth for the moment, but long-range, captivating truth that will shape our lives forever. Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, just let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery. Jesus, bathe us in your presence today. Let everything be fresh and new, because you are speaking it all over again to us. And let your truth, who you are, which is your presence, sink deep into the inner core of my being, our being, the corporate body here. Make us aware of yourself. Above all, please. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Jesus is the answer. I've hated that statement, saw it on bumper stickers, had people telling me that. Been in an altar, somebody would state that. Jesus is the answer. Well, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, everybody knows that. Jesus is the answer. Several things wrong with it. One thing is Jesus, who is the Jesus you're talking about? And immediately, of course, I make him out to be the historical character of the Old Testament or of the New Testament gospel accounts and prophesied by the Old Testament. So it's this historical character of 2,000 years ago, and he really doesn't, he's the answer. Well, good for him. But hey, I live in a practical world where I've got real problems right now in my life. And what am I going to do with these things? And somehow he seems so far removed, the historical Jesus. I know he is. Yeah, he cares. I guess he's in heaven. But affecting me here is difficult for me to get a hold of. Or I make him out to be the Jesus of the concept. In other words, he's a concept, he's an influence, he's a doctrine, he's a, I believe Jesus died, I believe that. Rose from the dead, no question. Sitting at the right hand of the Father, coming back the second time, but in the meantime, I'm here by myself. And I've got ideas, I've got doctrine, I've got theology, but that Jesus is not the answer, nor is just the historical Jesus by himself the answer. What we've been trying to say is Jesus we're talking about is the living, functioning, individual person who is here now. Not an idea, not a concept, not a doctrine, but this Jesus who is functioning, moving, breathing, if you please, walking, touching, affecting. He is here now. And that I embrace him, and in that embrace, that Jesus is the answer. Not the idea of Jesus, not the doctrine of Jesus, the Jesus, the living reality Jesus, that Jesus. That Jesus is the answer. A second thing that's really difficult with the statement, Jesus is the answer, is that Jesus is the answer. I immediately think in terms of Jesus giving me the answer. After all, he knows everything, so why doesn't he tell me what to do and give me the answer? And what really ticks me off about that whole thing is that Jesus, who is the answer, doesn't seem to answer. Because I cry out to him in the midst of my pain and agony and the circumstances of my life and say, hey, aren't you aware of what's going on? Why don't you take care of this? I beg him, I cry out to him, I ask for, if he's capable of all the miracles of the New Testament, Why couldn't he do a little one for me? And yet he doesn't. He leaves me in the midst of my circumstances. He leaves me in the midst of my pain. He doesn't let my next door neighbor die. It just goes on and on. And he just doesn't answer. And the reason is because that isn't the way he always answers. In fact, my experience has been he can't answer. He can do anything he wants to do. I got that. But my experience has been he seldom answers that way. See, I like the zap. I like the miracles. I like to remove the circumstance. I like to get rid of that, Jesus. I like to pay my bills, Christ. I like that. And he becomes the Jesus who says, hey, stay in the middle of your pain and agony. Going to leave you in a flip-by jail. Yeah, sing away. And somehow in the midst of the circumstances of my life and what is going on in my scene, he begins to shape and mold me, and I become the person he's dreamed I could be. And in that dynamic, he becomes the answer. That he's not the answer in terms of the Saturday seminar, which gives me the techniques to solve my problems. He's not the answer in the instruction of the manual that gives me an ability to manipulate the circumstances. He's not the instructor of the anger management class who teaches me how to gain control. He's the answer in terms of himself. Who he is. He doesn't give me the answer. He is the answer. That is so, I don't know how to communicate that. He doesn't tell me truth, he is truth. And when I embrace him in intimacy and know him in this oneness and in this merging of his being and my being and in the intertwining of our systems together, somehow, some way, I begin to see things I could not see otherwise. I begin to know what I could not know. Did he tell me the answer? Yeah, if he'd have told me the answer, I wouldn't have got it. But somehow he gave me himself, and the intertwining of his being, it begins to be clear. Because he is the answer. Jesus is the answer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if that is true, which it is, if that is true, then the number one fundamental of everything I need is him. I've got to know him. Not know about him, not data and information concerning him. I've got to get in some kind of I don't need to come to church and see him. I don't need a prayer time in the early morning hours. I don't need to pray before my meals. What I need is an intimacy with his personhood, whereby moment by moment by moment, he and I are in such tight interaction that I literally end up saying, he's my life. It's the praying without ceasing concept. We have an idea around here. We teach it all the time. It's the fundamental of the School of Practical Ministry. Every single class comes back to it. We hammer it, we yell it, we scream it, we just emphasize it. We are so sad when somebody comes through the school and goes away and, whoa, they didn't get this. It's the idea of saturation. What would happen if you would get such an intimacy with Jesus that you literally saturate consistently, constantly, moment by moment in his presence? What would happen if you would become a sponge just soaked with him. And every moment of your life, you're just dripping him because you're just intimate. And what would happen if you could develop a God awareness in your life where you were just always somehow, not on your knees, oh God of the sky, not that stuff, not even in a prayer meeting, but you lived in this intimacy of just saturating, just aware of him. You just felt you just felt him inwardly. Oh, not emotional stuff. I'm not talking that. I'm talking about, wow, what would happen if you just had an awareness that his presence is always intimately involved and you're relaxed and he's carrying you? Now, I'm sorry, because that's not very religious. That's not too churchy. But that's Christianity. And saturating in his presence until this God awareness becomes so intimate in your life, and you just somehow the problems then become seen properly because you're seeing now through his eyes, and you're living in his flow, and you're just aware of his intimacy. And if you were going to saturate in his presence and develop a God awareness, you'd want to have him speak to you, wouldn't you? I mean, you wouldn't want to just be out, whoa. You'd want some down-to-earth communication with him, wouldn't you? If you and him are overwhelming lovers, wouldn't you want some pillow talk at night? Wouldn't you want him whispering in your ear? Well, how's he going to talk to me? Oh, the book. So obviously, if you're going to develop a God awareness and saturate in his presence, you automatically know that you're going to saturate in his word. Well, I'm not a student. We're not talking about being a student. Well, I don't read. I watch TV. We're not talking about reading. Well, I'm comic books are my level. That's okay. I don't have a very good IQ. I'm not the brightest bulb in the room. I know. I'm that bulb back there that's out. I got it. That's me. See, this is not an academic. See, if you could see the scriptures as it is, that this scripture is not an academic dissertation by God. This is God who's literally, we've gone over this and over this. That can you imagine what God has done? Jesus says God is literally, God, the Trinity God, has reached down inside of himself, grabbed a hold of his nature, pulled it out, and dumped it in our world, and it ended up being a book. This is the nature of God in written form. God said, I'm a holy God. We all looked at him and said, well, that's nice. Good for you. But I don't have a clue of what that means. He said, I'll tell you. And reached down in his throat and grabbed out his nature and pulled it in. And if I were a man, here's how I'd live, buddy. And he put his nature right here in written form. And this is not some kind of academic dissertation by some guys that got together. This is a flowing move of the nature of God. And it's alive and moving. And then the second member of the Trinity, God himself, leaped off his throne and took on flesh and became a helpless man. And in his helplessness, in his absolute helplessness in his mother's womb and in his living experience, the Father through the Spirit filled the man called Jesus. So the very nature of God filled the man called Jesus, and the helplessness of Jesus and the nature of God merged together. Well, I thought this was the nature of God. It is, but the nature of God has come to live. This is the nature in written form. This is the nature in living form. And when the two got together, Jesus stepped into this book and said, hey, nature of God in the written form, nature of God in the living form, shape me. And Jesus' life is the fingers, the form, the shaping of the nature of God, written and inward. forming a life. And Jesus said, hey guys, come on and get in on this. This is what I got for you. This is the answer. Well, I want a miracle to solve my problem. See, I got a flat tire. Pump it up. And he says, wow, you would take that over the intimacy of my life and the whispering in your ear and the shaping of your character and your mind and making you the person you could be? You'd rather have me pump up your tire? What's wrong with you? Well, God, I got an ingrown toenail and it hurts. Zap it. What? You would take that over living with me day after day? Let me intertwine your life with my nature and literally flow in you and shape your mind and your thinking. Why don't you saturate? Why don't you living word, written word? Why don't you get in the middle of that and let the interaction of those two literally begin to permeate your life until I literally become the answer in your life? Saturating. I want to encourage you. This is not a finger in your face. I want to encourage you. This is not a bawling out. I want to encourage you. Oh, I know. I'm talking a little loud, but I'm trying to calm down. I want to draw you into this intimacy. I want you, don't live on your own. Don't have a Jesus that you salute. See, don't have a Jesus you come to visit. Don't have a Jesus you call up on the phone. See, don't have a Jesus who wants to fill you and have intimacy with you and intertwine with you and who wants to speak to you. Well, I don't understand the Bible. If he's the author and speaking it to you, he will explain it. Will you give him time? Would you take a passage? Would you write it down on a card? Would you carry it? Would you pray over it? Would you read it hour by hour, moment by moment, when you're driving down the road? Probably a bad idea. Read it, would you? When you're doing the dishes, would you? When you're at the stoplight, would you read it? When you're kissing your girl, think about it. Would you saturate written word, living word? Would you let him become alive in your life? Jesus is the answer. Well, Manley, if I did that, what would happen? Truth. That's what we've been doing in Matthew chapter 5. Let me show you. Jesus starts out with the Beatitudes. Whacks him on the back. It blew him away. We discovered it literally says at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he knocked them out of their senses. They just, what? Because he was talking about something that nobody had ever talked about. He approached this thing. All religion was, hey, I'm down here. There's where I want to go, and I work my way up. Jesus came along and whacked him on the back and said, woo, you're here. Wow, how'd I get there? Well, I'm just putting you here. Well, I have to earn that. No, you don't. Well, I got a stripe. No, you don't. Well, I'm going to try. No, don't try. Well, I'm going to no, don't discipline yourself. I'm whacking you on the back. You're here. Well, how did I get there? He said, you are poor in spirit, which we discovered literally means you are absolutely poverty-stricken. You tired of hearing this? You are absolutely poverty-stricken. You are helpless. Helpless. Again, well, I'm not. I can do some things. No, you're kidding me. You really think you can? Well, yeah. Hey, I can take a ball bat and hit a ball, knock it over the fence, and collect $1 million on a contract. I'm good. Yeah, but you can't get along with your wife. You hate the other players of the team. Would you admit there's something not You can't, down inside where it really counts. Yeah, I'm a good electrician. Well, I can, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, hey, I'm really good at messing up. So there's some things I'm really good at. Yeah, but do you see that at the core of your system, there's this helplessness, absolute helplessness. And he says in the next beatitude, if you will cling to that, if you will accept that, if you will allow that helplessness to grip you like grief and mourn and constantly mourn. Don't ever get over mourning. Just allow that helplessness just to constantly permeate your mind, and you just view yourself, just see yourself as you really are, totally, absolutely helpless. He will be able to come in his overwhelming resource, and you and him will merge, and you will become the kingdom. And in becoming the kingdom, the brand new kingdom, the kingdom then is not a location to go to. It is a relationship to experience. And in that intimacy with this person, this new creature is created that has all of these resources like meekness and fullness and mercy and seeing God and everything he lists in the other Beatitudes. So he's whacking you on the back, saying, woo, you're here. How'd you get there? Helpless, merged with him. Well, what if I don't do that? Well, then you live out of your helplessness, which is a constant mess, which is a constant failure, which is a constant covering, which is a constant rationalization, which is a constant adjustment. Well, it wasn't my fault. And I'm living out of my self-centeredness, which is always destructive. But if I will allow him to, if I will embrace my helplessness, not cover, not con, but embrace my helplessness and allow him, he will come in the merger. Well, what will that look like in life? He moves you into verse 13 and says, it will look like salt and light. And salt and light is not something you do. He says things like, you are the salt of the earth. If your salt loses its flavor, well, how can salt lose its flavor? What did it do? It didn't do. Salt is not a doing thing. Salt is a being thing. And if salt isn't being what it's supposed to be, it isn't salt. And what do? Dump it. It looks like salt. It has the texture of salt. Moisture makes it stick like salt. But it's not salt. Why? No flavor. Well, I look like Christian. I do the things Christians do. I act like Christians. I preach like Christians. I yell like preachers who are on fire. But you're not salt. You should be thrown out and trampled. Because you're faking everybody out. And really, you're making us look bad. Because people look at you and say, well, that's Christianity. So you're making us look bad. So what he's calling us to is not to an activity, not to a doing thing, not to an accomplishment. He's calling us to the intimacy, the saturation, I'm aware of you. Where he's calling us to the dependency. He's calling us to the yieldness. He's calling us to the relaxation in his presence. In fact, he says it's like light. Well, now, wait a minute, preacher, verse 16. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works. So there's good works. Yeah, there's good works, okay. And good works could shine, but you can do good works and not have shining in the midst of them. Do you understand? Two guys can do the same identical thing. See, I give you a cup of cold water. It's a good work. Amen, brother. I give you a bottle of water. Hey, you're thirsty. There it is. I did a good thing. Amen. But when I'm full of Jesus and I hand it to you, there is a dynamic to that thing that's way beyond anything else. Because it's not just a work, it's a good work now. Because somehow it's empowered and implanted by his grace. Wouldn't Wouldn't it be something to saturate in his presence? Wouldn't it be something to merge with his being? Wouldn't it be something living word and written word? Oh, I'm filled with the living word. I'm stepping into the written word, and my life is being shaped and sourced by him. And in the midst of the shaping and sourcing of my life by his power, I'm literally every activity from giving to shaking your hand to driving down the road to the whole aspect, outspill of my life. It's all impactive. That there's never a wasted action. Gotta have it. Now he says, verse 17, don't want you to think that I'm starting a new religion. Not starting a new religion, people. It's not a new religion. No. I know scribes and Pharisees, they got a whole different approach to this thing, and they're based on the Bible. They have the Old Testament, and they say the Old Testament, and out of that came oral traditions, 613 of them. So they're basing their whole 613 on the Scriptures. So I'm over here doing a whole new thing, so you think I've dumped the Scriptures. I have not. I'm taking you back to what the Scriptures really mean in the first place. So all that I'm saying to you is really the heart of the Scriptures themselves. Oh. And he takes us back to the Scriptures. I did not come to destroy. Says it twice. Did not come, I came to fulfill. And what's the fulfillment of the Scriptures? Oh, let me give it to you again. God reached down inside of himself, grabbed a hold of his nature, pulled it out, dumped it into the world. And here it was, the nature of God. And then the second member of the Trinity came in helplessness, and in helplessness embraced his helplessness, and the nature of God filled him, and Jesus became the first member of the kingdom, and then he stepped into the Scriptures, the nature of God, and filled with the nature of God. He said, shape me, and Jesus fulfilled everything that's in the nature of God in the Scriptures, and everything that's in the nature of God in the indwelling. And you're seeing a life fulfilling the Scripture. Jesus says, do you see that if you lived in this saturation, if you lived in this intimacy, if you lived in this oneness, if this really took place in your life, if you had a God awareness, if you were flowing with his resource, if you embraced your helplessness and allowed his resource to fill you, and you merged with him, do you see that if you had that, if you were saturating in his presence and saturating in his word, do you see that that would produce a life so superior and so far beyond everything that the scribes and the Pharisees have ever proposed? All that the rules have ever suggested? Well, preacher, I read the Bible. It's a book of rules. No, it's not. Well, preacher, I study the Scriptures. It's a manual. It's an instruction. It's instructions on how to put your life together. No, it's not. Well, preacher, it's a roadmap to heaven, and when I want to make a turn, I consult it. No, it's not. It's not. The Scriptures is the nature of God. Well, I'm filled with the nature of God. I get that. The Scriptures is the nature of God. So when the two of them I saturate and the two of them get together in my life, they form me and shape me. And you realize that what comes out of that is a life that is so superior. Oh, well, superior to everything the Pharisees and scribes and all of their legalism and all of their rules ever had. Well, how is it superior? He says, let me give you 6 examples. I can hardly wait to get to the 6th one so I can go over all again. Let me give you 6 examples. The first one is murder. See, the scribes and the Pharisees said, wow, I got all this stuff going on inside of me, man. I just get mad. I know. I lose my temper. I got it. I just flip out. I know. I had a bad day. I know. My hair was messed up. Bad hair day. It just ticked me off. I know. 4 flat tires. Oh, it's just been, my wife was cranky this morning. And it just boils over. And well, you got to control that. How am I going to control it? I'll tell you what the lid is. I'll tell you what the boundaries are you got to put around that. Don't go beyond this. What's the boundaries? Don't murder. Don't murder. Well, I hate. That's okay, but don't murder. I get all upset. That's okay, but don't murder. At least control it and don't murder. So you can proudly walk around and say, I haven't ever killed anybody. Jesus says, that's what. Let me take you to the, if you were merged with him. Oh, if you were merged with him. If you saturated him. If his presence intertwined your presence. If the nature of God within you and the nature of God in the book, if those ever got together to shape your life, what would that be like? Don't hate. Don't be angry. Don't demean. Don't belittle. In your mind, in your inner heart, don't, what an idiot. Like you're superior. You're helpless, remember? Do you see how far superior this is? Well, preacher, I'm trying not to hate him. Well, don't try. It's making you a wreck. Just hate them. Just go ahead and hate their guts. Because all you're trying isn't accomplishing anything. Well, what should I do? Merge. Saturate. Living word, written word. Superior. So let me give you a second example. Adultery. Well, the old timer over here in the legalism, they said, got this body drive. It's just, you got to control it. You got to, don't let it. What's the boundaries you're going to put around your sexual drive? Well, don't commit adultery. Flirt, okay. Fantasies, okay. All the other kind of emotions within you, emotional involvement, okay. Just don't sleep with your brother's wife. Jesus said, let me take you to, can you imagine this far superior life existence of merging with God, of saturating with him? Do you realize what that could do in your life? Saturating in his presence and saturating in his word and the merger of your helplessness and him until he, moment by moment, is literally sourcing your existence. Do you realize what that could do, where that would take you? It would change the way you look at things, your perspective. Well, I thought it was just, my sexuality was just some sex. No, man. Your sexuality affects the wholeness of who you are. Your approach to life, the way you walk, the way you wear your hair, the whiskers on your chin, all of that's a part of your sexuality, man. Your masculinity. Well, I'm the head of my house. Where did you get that idea? Where? Well, it's a part of my sexual masculinity. Nobody's going to take my parking spot. Where did that all come from? Well, it spilled right out of a helplessness that wouldn't embrace his presence. And that helplessness operates out itself in self-centeredness, which literally reached out and grabbed a hold of your sexuality and causes the way you see everything. So your approach to life, the way you walk, the strut, the cockiness, the draw line, you cut me off on the high. All of that stuff, what's that all about, man? You didn't get into the merger. You didn't. And he redefines adultery. Well, I've never committed adultery. Yes, you have. Forevermore. You got mad when the guy cut you off. That's a spiritual adultery, friend. That's your sexuality filled with yourself. Well, I've got a right to go where I want to go. Where did that come from? That's your masculinity, sexuality, self-centered spilling out of your life. That's spiritual adultery. Spiritual adultery. Oh, think of merging. Think of saturating in His presence, saturating in His Word. Think of your life. Oh, what you could be. Let me give you another example. Verse 31 and 32. It has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery. Oh. Finally, Jesus is going to get down to the practical. We were all wrapped up in this spiritual whatever. And, loving everybody and not getting angry and, all this stuff. And all that's, hey, good. It's good to be stimulated and think about it once in a while. But I live in a practical world, and my wife is not what she ought to be, and I want to know, when can I get a divorce? When can I get rid of her? What? Do you think, come on. Do you think that Jesus has been operating in this, His Spirit, your helplessness, His presence, His nature, His living nature, His written nature, and the two of them coming together in you? You think He's, and that's going to produce this life that's going to live, and it's going to be, whoa, and it isn't going to be, I didn't murder. It's going to be, whoa, something happened so way beyond that. It's going to be, whoa, I didn't commit adultery. No, something happens in your thought process and takes you, whoa, up here. You're in a whole different life dimension. And you think He's going to come to marriage and divorce and say, well, let's go back down here. No. Well, when can I get a divorce? He isn't talking about that. That's not the subject. Well, now, wait a minute. Right there he says it. Now, didn't you read that, Brester? Any reason except sexual immorality? Yeah, he just got done redefining sexual immorality. Didn't he? Wasn't that the whole second illustration? Let me redefine sexual immorality for you, he said. You say, don't commit adultery. That's sexual immorality. Let me tell you what sexual immorality is. It's the look. It's the way you look at things, which is your whole sexuality spilling through and dominating. So the abuse, the gotta have my own way, that's sexual immorality, brother. So he's redefined the whole thing. Why? Because he's not talking about down here when you can divorce or when you cannot divorce. He's talking about, guys, are you gonna? Do you realize what could happen? Can you imagine? Here's a female who's all wrapped up in herself. She's helpless, yeah, but she won't embrace that, and she's just all wrapped up in herself. And she lives out of her helplessness. Well, if she's going to live out of her helplessness, what kind of life is she going to live? Chaotic. Why? She's helpless, but she won't admit it. So she keeps operating on her helplessness, which means she's constantly in a mess. It's constantly. Well, here's a guy over here. He's helpless, I know, but he won't embrace his helplessness. Yeah, you're right. And he's living out of his self-centeredness and out of his helplessness. And what's his life like? Constant chaotic. Well, let's have him get married. What kind of marriage are they going to have? Jesus is saying, guys, what would happen if she would get into, what would happen if he would get into, and you had two people who embraced their helplessness. And he filled them. And they lived out of his power and in a God awareness and in a merger with him. And it began to flow in their lives. What kind of marriage would they have? Well, when can I get a divorce? That isn't asked on this level. So he's not. See, we want to take verse 31 and 32 and go back down here. So if you want answers to when can I get a divorce and when is it the right thing to do, and if I get a divorce and I remarry, have I committed adultery, and is the sin divorce or is the sin remarry? If you want answers to those questions, write Dr. Phil. Because it isn't in this passage. It's not in this passage. Right in what he's talking about. He didn't do that with murder. He didn't do that with adultery. He isn't doing that with marriage. So if you come to Jesus and say, well, when can I get a divorce? He said, when are you going to die? That's what he's going to say. Well, what's the regulations on? He's going to say, there aren't any regulations, people. This is about intimacy and oneness. This is about God filling your life. This is about every circumstance you're in, even if it's a bad marriage. This is about everything that's going on in your life, driving you to embrace your helplessness that he might fill you. This is about saturation. This is about, would you develop a God awareness? Would you live in his written word and live in his living word? And would you allow those two to literally shape you? Would you be filled with the nature of God? Step into the nature of God, his word. And would you let it shape you until your life begins to look like him and he changes the bone structure of your face until, wow, you have his image. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't say, yes? If there's a possibility of that, I want it. Well, preacher, there's a possibility. I guess there might be somebody like that someplace. Jesus was like that, okay. Maybe others have gotten that through the history. But, hey, it's not probable. Normal people, they don't live like that. That's not normal. You got to admit that. Well, what's the possibilities? If it's probable, if it's not probable, but it's possible, I mean, it could be, but probably won't be. What's the possibility of it? What's the probability? Well, maybe 1 out of every 10,000 people who say they're Christians get that. Well, I just want to announce to you, dear friend, I'm going to be the one. I want that. If it's possible. If it's possible. I don't care how many failures I've had in the past. I don't care how many times, I've been to the altar. I don't care. I'm not interested in that. I don't care how many times I've attempted and failed. I don't care how many times I've fallen on my face. I don't care. I don't care how many other people have been, and I don't care what the success rate is for anybody else. I only know if there is the slightest possibility I can enter into, and have this merger, and I can, God awareness in my life, and He can source me, and I can quit living out of my helplessness, because He has come and transformed my helplessness into His availability. If that's possible, I'm going to give my whole self to that. I'm going to go after that. I'm going to night and day. That's going to be my one dream, my one passion, my one drive. I'm going to hunger for that more than I want. I'm going to want that more than I want food, more than I want sex, more than I want wealth, more than I want fame. I am going to live. That's going to become the passion of my life. And Jesus, I know this morning that regardless of how dumb I am, or how much self-discipline I lack, or how helpless I really am, You will not let me miss it if this becomes my passion. So God, the only thing in my life this morning that keeps me from living in this realm, from experiencing You like this, the only thing that stops me, God, is I just don't want it all that much. See, I want You, Jesus, the answer, the historical Christ. I want You, the Jesus of doctrine. I want You to zap me. Come on, where's the miracles, God? I don't want the changed life. I don't want the intimacy. See, I choose get me out of Philippi jails. I choose heal my body. I choose pay my bills. I choose all of those things over oneness with You and intimacy with You. But this morning, oh God, I'm crying out to You. I choose You. Hey, let me stay in my sickness, but give me You. Let me stay in my financial difficulty, but give me You. Train me, shape me, whatever that takes, God. Whatever circumstances must be in my life that You want to use to shape me in Your image. Bring it on, God, but give me an awareness of You. Give me the deep inward sense of You. Fill me with Yourself. And I am so sorry, oh God, I have sought the wrong Jesus way too often. I wanted the Jesus of magic tricks. Heads are bowed. He loves you. Oh, He loves you. He loves you. Did you hear me? He loves you. How desperate He is to become one with you. He is not withholding Himself from you. He is extending Himself in every way. He loves you so much, He'll not let you be a spoiled brat. He will not baby you or pamper you. He is pulling you into the strength of His being. He is stripping from you everything you depend on except Him, that you might have nothing but Him and more of Him, and day after day, you and Him in saturation and infiltration and merging and the intertwining of your being and His being. He shapes your life. Our altar is open for you to embrace your helplessness. For there's only one thing Jesus is talking about: your helplessness, His resource, and how the two of them ought to get together. Jesus is the answer. The real Jesus, the living Jesus, who wants to live His life out through your dependency, your helplessness. Want to join us in seeking Him?